our annual meeting and to have Senator Van Hollen as our special guest. Just a few housekeeping issues, as I mentioned before. You've been admitted muted. Please remain muted. So that will help minimize extraneous noise. There may be time for a few questions after Senator Van Hollen's remarks. If you wish to ask a question, please send it to Barbara Fluke in the chat. Questions will be reviewed and asked of the Senator by Barbara. I now turn the meeting over to our President, Cece Traynor.
Good afternoon, welcome, and thank you for coming to the keynote address for our 2021 annual meeting of the League of Women Voters of Kent County, Maryland. We are very happy to have Senator Chris Van Hollen as our speaker today. We have three officials from the League of Women Voters of Maryland with us today that I would like to acknowledge. Please wave when I call your name. Lois Hibble, the co-president of the League of Women Voters of Maryland, is here. Elaine Apter, the vice president, is here, and she is also our state liaison for our Kent County League. And Nikki Tyree is the new state director, and she is here. We're happy to have all of you. And Elaine, we want to thank you for all of the things you've done for us over the years. The League of Women Voters envisions a democracy where every single person has the desire, the right, the knowledge, and the confidence to participate. And we work hard to assist citizens to become educated, active, and involved in public policy decisions, as well as the election process. The League is proud to be nonpartisan, neither supporting nor opposing candidates of any political party at any level of government, but always working on vital issues of concern to our members and to the public. Senator Van Hollen began his career in public office in 1992 as a member of the Maryland State Legislature and served there as a representative and later as state senator until 2002, when he was elected to represent Maryland's 8th congressional district in the US House of Representatives. While in the House, he was chosen to be ranking member of the House Budget Committee and worked to protect Social Security and Medicare. In 2016, he was elected to the United States Senate, where he has sponsored 7 bills that were enacted. He has successfully worked on bipartisan legislation to expand medical research, to protect the Chesapeake Bay, to fight childhood cancer, and to assist families with children with disabilities. It is my pleasure to welcome Senator Chris Van Hollen.
Well, thank you. It is great to be here with the Kent County League of Women Voters and members from the Maryland League of Women Voters. President Traynor, thank you for that introduction. Thank you so much for your leadership. And I want to thank Barbara Fluke, who worked with our team as well to set all this up. And I'm looking forward to the conversation. But I want to make a few points. I do want to start by remembering the late Kent County Commissioner Bill Pickram, who I was able to work with over many years. I have a service academy board made up of people from around the state of Maryland that provide me with input for applicants to the different military academies, the Naval Academy, the other academies, and he was a participant on that. And I know he's going to be dearly missed, and I know he was a supporter of the League of Voters, Women Voters of Kent County. So I did want to remember him as we start off today. And then just thank the League of Women Voters for being the custodians of our democracy in so many important ways, urging every citizen, regardless of party, to vote and to take seriously their responsibilities as citizens in this great democracy of ours. And that mission is really more important now than many other times in our history, because I do think some of the foundational questions about trust in our democracy are being put to the test. And so I think the League of Women Voters mission is more important than ever. And all we have to do is look to the terrible events of January 6th here at the Capitol. And I just got back from a Senate Foreign Relations Committee hearing. I'm in my Senate office on January 6th here in the United States Capitol. Our democracy was literally under attack. And it's not a partisan statement to explain what the issues there were. What happened, as we know, was the former president directed a violent mob to attack the Capitol of the United States on the day that we were counting the returns from the Electoral College. In other words, the purpose of the attack on the Capitol was to disrupt the counting of the votes, to disrupt the results of our democracy. And it was based on this fraudulent claim that the votes in the last election were somehow cooked, that they were fraudulent, despite the fact that the former president's own Department of Justice said there was no fraud, and despite the fact that the president's head of the Homeland Security Division responsible for overseeing our elections said that they were the most protected elections in our history. So what we've seen, though, as a result of this big lie is an effort by some state legislatures around the country to pass laws to make it harder for people to vote, especially making it harder for lower income people to vote, targeting communities of color, targeting younger people. We can see very clearly that that's the intent of it. If you look back a few years, North Carolina passed a voter suppression law that went up through the federal court system, and the federal courts found that it was designed to diminish African American voting participation and designed to do it with real precision. So what we're seeing here is an effort not to win elections by trying to win more people over to a platform or to ideas, but to try to win elections through subtraction by making it harder for people to vote. And that runs contrary to the entire idea behind American democracy, and certainly the idea behind the formation of the League of Women Voters, who of course, pushed so hard for the passage of the 19th Amendment. We just recently celebrated the 100th anniversary of its ratification, as all of you know better than anybody. And so it's our job as citizens to make sure that we keep that idea of democracy alive and not allow it to be hijacked for political purposes. So what do we do? What we're trying to do here at the national level is to pass the For the People Act. And the For the People Act is, it's HR 1. It was the first bill put forward in the House. It's also got the number here in the Senate, S1, both cases to signify the importance of these measures for our democracy. And they do a number of things, but first and foremost is that they would set a national standard to protect the right to vote in terms of national rules for vote by mail, national rules for voter registration, making sure that people had access to early voting, and that people couldn't start changing the terms of election in order to deny people access to the voting booth or make it harder for people to vote. The other big pieces of that legislation, the For the People Act, include an effort to improve the Federal Election Commission. It's based on a bill that I introduced. There's another provision to strengthen the public financing of presidential elections. There's a very important piece that was championed by my colleague from Maryland, John Sarbanes, on campaign finance reform, again, to allow more public financing of elections. And that, of course, is designed to make sure that decisions made by the House and the Senate are based on the public interest, not based on contributions from deep-pocketed special interests. And then another very important part of the For the People Act is the piece that we've referred to as the Disclose Act. And that's intended to end secret money in politics. I think all of you remember the decision by the Supreme Court In Citizens United, it was a nice sounding name for a case that actually empowered corporations for the first time to be able to spend their money directly to try to elect or defeat candidates. It was a 5-4 decision, which again reminds us of the importance of every vote, not just in the House and the Senate, but also on the Supreme Court. And it was, in my view, one of the worst Supreme Court decisions ever, because it not only overturned statutes that had been passed through a democratic process, it also overturned previous Supreme Court precedent. And that opened the floodgates to, again, corporate money into politics. And interestingly, the majority at the same time said, well, this isn't going to be so much of a problem because we expect these contributions, these independent expenditures, to be transparent. We expect voters to know about them. Well, the reality is that despite our efforts to pass the Disclose Act, we've not gotten a majority to do it. And the Disclose Act is something I'm very familiar with. I authored that bill in the House of Representatives back in 2010, right after the Supreme Court decision in Citizens United. We actually got it out of the House of Representatives. It came to the United States Senate, and it had 59 votes on the day it was brought up for a vote in the United States Senate. It would have had 60 votes, but for the fact that Senator Kennedy had passed away in the meantime, after that House passed the vote and before the vote in the United States Senate. And because it did not have the 60 votes needed to overcome a filibuster, but still had 59 votes, but not enough to overcome a filibuster, the Disclose Act did not become law at that time. Had it become law, we would not be flooded with hundreds of millions of dollars of secret money in our campaigns and elections today. And that's just one of many reasons why I believe that we should not allow an antiquated filibuster law to overcome the importance of passing laws to protect our democracy, as well as other measures. Because that bill had 59 votes out of 100 in the United States Senate. But because of the 60 vote requirement under a filibuster, it never was able to get to that final vote, which would have required a simple majority. So I do believe strongly that we need to protect our democracy, and that this Senate rule takes an anti-democratic institution, the United States Senate. I say anti-democratic with a small d. And I say it's anti-democratic because it, as you well know, by design, we have 2 senators from every state. You get 2 from the state of Wyoming that has fewer voters than the District of Columbia, and 2 senators from California. So my point is that the United States Senate already has an anti-majoritarian tilt. And in my reason, there's no cause or no reason to have a Senate invented rule. It's not in the Constitution, layered on top of that, that makes the Senate even more anti-democratic, small d. And that's what the filibuster rule does. And what you're seeing here in the Senate now is lots of important bills, at least in my view, piling up. The For the People Act, the legislation on gun safety, the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act, many other measures that in my view should be put to a majority vote in the United States Senate. And it was a majority vote in the end of the day that was used to pass the American Rescue Plan, which I think is broadly supported by the American people. But that's only because we were able to use a special exemption to the filibuster for things that are budget related, and that's called the budget reconciliation process. So, you know, the American people are getting, I think, a deep education on Senate procedure these days, because Senate procedure is, in my view, unnecessarily preventing democracy from doing its work. So let me close there. There's so many issues, but I want to close, and again, by thanking you, the League, for all you do to make sure that we encourage every American to participate in our democracy. And it's only when we have a really free exchange of ideas and everyone gets out and is able to vote, that can happen. I mean, disagreement and debate is the essence of our democratic system. But at the end of the day, in my view, we should allow democracy to work its will. So thank you for having me. And I'm also pleased to be joined by Melissa Kelly, who's been, my terrific ambassador to the Eastern Shore. And I look forward to getting out and seeing everybody in person when we beat this pandemic. I hope everybody has been able to weather the storm. It's been a very difficult time for our country, our state. And we do see light at the end of the tunnel here. And I do look forward to coming and visiting with you when we finally put this behind us. So thank you all very, very much. And I look forward to trying to answer any questions and welcome any comments that you may have.
Senator Van Hollen, our first question comes from Lois Hibble, who is with our state League of Women Voters. It says, someone I know said that the For the People Act could be declared unconstitutional because regulation of elections is reserved to the states. Is there any truth to this?
I don't think this would be found unconstitutional. I mean, you can never be sure what any particular Supreme Court will decide, but I believe Congress is empowered to establish these national regulations for federal elections. This is not an effort to, regulate terms of state elections, although Supreme Courts have obviously done that through some of their rulings. But in terms of federal elections, I believe that the federal government is definitely empowered to take this action. I should also say, just as a precaution, this bill is written in a way that if parts of it were ever to be struck down by the Supreme Court, other parts of it would survive. There are severability provisions in the event that, again, the court were to say to one part of it, that is unconstitutional. We would want to make sure that the rest of it could continue to stand as law.
And I want to remind people, if they, want to send chat messages to me, to Barb Fluke, that will get it directly on our line. We have a question. How will Maryland Eastern Shore benefit from the proposed infrastructure plan? What provisions will address the shortage of public transportation in rural areas, as well as a lack of broadband internet? What projects do you see most important for Maryland?
Well, I'm glad you asked that question. Just yesterday in the Senate Appropriations Committee, which is one of the committees I serve on, we had testimony from Secretary Buttigieg, Secretary Raimondo, and as well as the new EPA Administrator Regan, as well as Secretary of Housing, Secretary Fudge. So it will help the Eastern Shore and rural Maryland in a number of ways. Let me start with high-speed internet, because as here we are meeting virtually, and the pandemic has clearly highlighted the problems with the digital divide. Even before the pandemic broke out, I'd introduced legislation to close what we used to call the homework gap for our kids, right? Students who were not able to access the internet, even though that was an essential tool for doing their homework. Obviously, that wasn't the case when I was in school. You needed your pencils and pens and paper, but now that's an essential tool. And of course, what was the homework gap became a full-blown learning gap in our schools. And then, of course, we have small businesses and families. In my view, high-speed internet broadband connections are to the 21st century what electricity was to the 20th century, and we need to make it universal. We did take some very positive steps in a number of the bills that we passed through the Congress over the last year, the CARES Act, and more recently, the American Rescue Plan. But the American Jobs Act, the Infrastructure Modernization Bill, would really finish the job. I mean, the goal there is to connect 100% of households and businesses in the country to high-speed internet. And that would obviously be, I think, a big benefit to all. As you point out, transit systems should not be sort of unique or confined to large metropolitan areas. We have a growing need for transit in rural areas, and this plan would allow for greater build out of transit in rural areas. And on the housing issue, affordable housing, of course, is a big issue in all parts of our state and all parts of our country. And this bill does include important provisions to increase the supply of affordable housing. So some people have criticized this bill as taking an overly expansive view of what our infrastructure is. But I would just point out to the critics that in the 21st century, infrastructure is not confined just to roads and bridges. We do need to work hard to repair them and modernize them, and this bill would do that. But infrastructure also includes, of course, high-speed internet, access to affordable housing, and also to things like childcare and senior care. Because if we really want to make sure that people have the ability to go to and from work, we need to also make sure that their kids have a safe place to stay and learn. And the same holds true with seniors. So all of this is part of our vision of a 21st century infrastructure, and I do believe it will benefit Kent County and Eastern Shore in very significant ways.
From Bill Fluke, it says, if the filibuster rule is eliminated in the Senate, I've heard folks worry that the next time a different party gets into power, everything that the present administration has accomplished could be reversed. What are the risks of eliminating the filibuster?
Well, there's no doubt risk to eliminating the filibuster. And I know that well. I've been in the Senate at a time that the House had a Republican majority with Speaker Paul Ryan, and Mitch McConnell was the leader in the Senate. Donald Trump was in the White House. And so there were certainly times that we employed the filibuster to block things that we thought were harmful. But I have concluded that the bigger danger to our country going forward is the political gridlock that we see. And there are so many huge unmet needs that need to be addressed, that my view is the accountability in the system needs to be elections. And that's the way democracy should work. It should not be a Senate-invented rule that allows a minority to block the will of the majority. As I said, the Senate is already structured in a way that's anti-democratic in the sense that rural states get 2 senators too, even though they have much fewer people. You have a situation where even without the filibuster, senators who represent a great minority of the overall American people can still block things, even with the 50 vote requirement. The filibuster layers that on top of it. And again, it wasn't part of the checks and balances in the Constitution. I think we have lots of necessary checks and balances in the Constitution, but I think the filibuster now has become an impediment to progress. And I do very much recognize the risks. But as I say, that's what elections are for. I think the check should be, if you pass something that the American people don't like, there's an opportunity during the next election to have a referendum on House members, on at least a third of the Senate at a time, and of course in the presidential races.
Redistricting reform is a major priority with the League of Women Voters. Are you concerned about the accuracy of the census?
Well, I am. We did see, unfortunately, in the last 4 years, a deliberate attempt to, in my view, sabotage the accuracy of the census, and that has unfortunately led to delays. And then there are also, been some questions about the accuracy. We are all trying to work our way through that and make sure that the Census Bureau can have a full count as we go into the the next election cycle. And, again, the hope is to have that information available to state legislatures and governors before the end of the year. And, as you know, in Maryland, the state legislature has has authority. Ultimately, the governor has input into redistricting plans, but the state legislature ultimately can determine those plans. Again, what we hope it will be based on an accurate census count.
Excellent. Here we have time for one more question. You talked a little bit about developing police reforms. What kinds of things do you see necessary right now, that the role that the federal government can play?
Right. So a couple things. One is there's the bill that's been introduced in the House and the Senate and has already passed the House. It's called the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act, and it would essentially establish a lot more by way of transparency, and transparency designed to bring more accountability. So that police who have been found to have not lived up to their sworn duties, or have been found to have engaged in misconduct in the past, there needs to be a record of that, and it needs to be, they shouldn't be able to just go to another police department. We need more transparency in how we conduct reviews of police misconduct. And as you know, the Maryland General Assembly has enacted legislation, and in fact, in many cases, overrode the governor's veto to put it in place to make Maryland really a leader, in my view, in terms of oversight and transparency when it comes to misconduct by police, to make sure that it's not a closed process, to make sure that there's it's not just reviewed by other police officers, but that there are public citizens involved in oversight boards making some of these determinations. And at the federal level, the George Floyd Justice Policing Act includes a lot of provisions to, again, increase that transparency of disciplinary proceedings, and making sure that we can instill greater confidence. In my view, the verdict issued just yesterday in the Chauvin case, the George Floyd's murder, was a just verdict. But I think we all recognize that we have a lot of work to do to make systemic changes. And so the other bill that I've been focused on, and I introduced it in the Senate, and Congresswoman Karen Bass from California introduced it in the House. She's the former chair of the Congressional Black Caucus. We introduced this last year. We're going to reintroduce it. But that bill is designed to create some systems change. So in those cases, in those incidents that really don't require a use of force response, where we've seen just in too many cases, they escalate unnecessarily to tragic killings, that we create an alternative emergency response. And I'm thinking largely of so many cases that involve a mental health situation. And instead of dispatching police as the first responder, we're looking at encouraging jurisdictions to dispatch people who are better trained in de-escalation and dealing with those kind of situations. Obviously, there are going to still be situations that require use of force. And in those cases, obviously, we still want a police response. But what we see in looking at so many of these cases is that tragically situations that don't need to escalate into use of force have resulted in these tragic and unnecessary and unjust deaths. So that is another piece that we're working to try to include as part of a justice reform and systems reform approach.
Thank you so much. That concludes our questions, and I'll leave it up to you if you have final comments for us. That would be welcome.
Well, thank you. I'm not surprised. All great questions. These are exactly the issues that we're debating right now in our Senate Democratic Caucus and in the Senate at large. And all of them, in my view, need to be addressed. And to come full circle here, we need a strong democratic process to do that. And we need to protect that process against efforts to put up barriers to voting. We need collectively to speak out when we see people lying to the public about claims of voting fraud that don't exist. As many of us, including Senator Romney, pointed out during the deliberations on the President Trump's impeachment trial, everyone just has to have the political fortitude and courage to tell the truth here. And we have enough to debate. There are enough legitimate differences of opinions when we are debating the facts as they are. We don't need to make the situation in our country even harder by making up facts and lying about lying about things. So that is why I do believe that the League of Women Voters has been such an important nonpartisan institution to keep us focused on what's essential about our democracy, and of course fighting from the 19th Amendment and before to make sure that we have full participatory democracy, and that our future as a healthy democracy and our future role in the world depends on maintaining the strength of that democracy and making sure everybody can participate and have a chance to vote. So thank you for the opportunity to be here with you today, and thank you for everything that you stand for and do. And I do look forward to coming to visit as soon as possible.
We would love
Take
to.
care.
A nice hand. Thank you very much.
Thank you. It's great to be with you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Okay, we will now transition to our business meeting for the Kent County League. If you are not a local league member, you're welcome to stay, but please stay muted